Dollars for infrastructure spending and tax breaks for the middle class and small businesses. That was President Obama's message today when he addressed a crowd in Ohio. He singled out House Minority Leader John Boehner, saying he has failed to offer new economic solutions. In response, Boehner said if the president is serious about creating jobs, he'll freeze tax rates and cut federal spending. And 7 people have been arrested by Mexico's Marines for killing 72 Central and South American migrants near the U.S. border. Investigators believe the migrants refused to work for a drug gang. For more on these stories, visit foxnews.com. Glenn Beck returns in a moment, but first, Brett Baer previews special report. Hey, Brett.
Hey, Patty Ann. Coming up, how would the president's plan to let some of the Bush tax cuts expire affect small businesses? You'll hear from some of them. And why is Ohio such a focus? Join me at the top of the hour for special report, but now, back to Glenn Beck.
Now back with part 3 of the Glenn Beck program's 5-day back-to-school crash course. Tonight, U.S. history as you've never learned about it before. Glenn feels that unions are misunderstood. They may say they want to help out the little people, but when you trace back to their roots, they weren't exactly for equal rights for all.
The real ticking time bomb in this country? Unions. It's not the national debt. No. It's the debt to the unions and the union workers. Pensions. You see, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that is exactly the way people in power like it. You've got to change your perspective, and the way to do it is to learn history. If I asked you, why do we have labor unions? You would say, and partly correctly, because of out-of-control companies. But if I asked you about the turn of the century, and I said, tell me what you know about the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, you would probably say, answer yourself now, they're rich, they were robber barons, they were industrialists, they were bad guys. Okay? Now if I said, at the same time, tell me about the unions of that time period, you would probably say, well, they were for the little people. They were, trying to help people, get work and have it be fair, minority groups, Irish, black, Chinese, everything else. You'd be guessing, but that's probably what you would believe. Crystal clear on the robber barons, I'm guessing. My question is to you, why is it that the Marxist, the communist, and the progressive unions have a history that is kind of fuzzy and happy, and yet the capitalist robber barons are crystal clear in your mind? All you remember about unions is stuff like this growing up. Look for the union label. When I put the glasses of history on your face, you will not ever be able to think of look for the union label the same way ever again. Union members, you are not racist, revolutionaries, or communists. Maybe some are, but you know what? Some non-union members are as well. But your dues and your fees and your willingness not to recognize who your unions have been from the beginning are empowering communists, racists, and those who will be responsible for destroying our country and then monopolizing, coming in and using those events to gain even more power. You've been given a history full of half-truths, kernels of truth, or out-and-out lies. You must restore history to understand the future. The racism of labor unions. I want you to, don't take anything that I say as fact. Don't take my word for it. Do your own homework. It's all there. Some of the stuff we're going to show you tonight, we got from the union website. I believe in the American worker. But the labor unions keep their worker quiet by giving them insane pensions. And everybody, it's normal. You go, ah. There is an uncomfortable history. But because of this uncomfortable history, it becomes an uncomfortable future in times of trouble. The people at the top have not changed. Let me take you back to this. I'd love to show you a video, but I can't. It is the Panic of 1873. A European depression hit American shores. A major U.S. investment bank failed. Credit dried up, foreclosures increased, banks failed as economic depression swept across the country. The banking house, J. Cook and Company, the major backer of the Northern Pacific Railroad, failed. So, factories closed. Thousands of workers lost their job. Unemployment grew. So did the antagonism between labor and business leaders. Flash forward now to 1877. This is in San Francisco. Unemployment in the city hovered around 20%. See if you think any of these possibilities could happen in the future. Discontent among the jobless grew, as did support of the labor movement. It was associated with the Marxist International Association of Working Men. Thousands of disgruntled workers gathered in their sandlot near City Hall, where they denounced capitalists, the newly rich, and their favorite scapegoat, the Chinese workers. In July, striking railroad workers in Pittsburgh did this. This one was in Baltimore. This one was in Chicago. This one was in West Virginia. They clashed with militia, and deadly results all across the country. In San Francisco, a meeting was held in support of those striking workers. Here it is. California Working Man's Party was born in racism because they found their success in the slogan, "The Chinese must go." Labor leader Dennis Kearney incited anti-Chinese sentiments and hit on workers' anxiety, saying, quote, "We intend to try and vote the Chinaman out, to frighten him out, and if this won't do it, to kill him out. The heathen slaves must leave this coast." The unions had shown their racist bent before. One of the first union labels, remember I said, look for the union label. Here's one of the first ones. This one is for cigars. The cigar was made by white men. This proclamation spelled it out. The labor wanted the Chinese out, and they were successful. Thanks to the efforts of the Labor Party, 1880, California banned the importation and use of Chinese labor. Congress did the same thing with the Exclusion Act of 1882, stopping all Chinese immigration for 10 years. But it was renewed and modified so many times. The policy actually remained in place until 1943 and was not completely dropped until the 1960s. When they weren't racist. How about when they were just threatening? You remember when I showed you this a few weeks ago? This is SEIU. SEIU protesters on the lawn of a Bank of America employee. He was not there, but his teenage son was home and terrified. Let me take you back again to San Francisco and 1877. This guy. Okay, remember this? 1877. This is the same scene, except it's in picture form because they didn't have a video camera. Labor leader Dennis Kearney and his cronies, they went to the wealthy neighborhoods in San Francisco and told at least one meeting, quote, "A little judicious hanging right now, here and now, would be the best course to pursue with the capitalists and the stock sharps who are all threatening time to rob us." Yet in another meeting, he warned the railroad owners to fire all Chinese laborers. Remember Judge Lynch. That's the labor union. It's the same thing. History repeats itself unless you understand history and you stop it.
The labor union leadership today would like us to believe that it's really something to help the little guy. But haven't they used strong-arm tactics and even racism to determine who gets in the unions and who gets jobs?
The racist roots run deep in the union movement. In the black leadership from the time of the Civil War and after to World War II, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois are the two most prominent leaders. They didn't agree on much, but one thing they did agree on was unions were bad for black Americans. They discriminated against blacks, they wouldn't let them in unions, and they harmed them and killed them sometimes when they served as strikebreakers.
Again, something we never learned in the public schools.
Rarely. And unions, I mean, you look at this question, are unions good for America? Is there any unionized industry that has flourished? I mean, look at the auto workers, the steel workers, the rubber workers in the tire industry. Are any of those industries better off in helping America more because of what the unions have done in those industries?
The answers are obvious. Ahead, she was the mother of birth control. You learned that in school. But what you aren't taught is that she wanted to use birth control to wipe out an entire race. What you've never been taught about Margaret Sanger. Next.